Good evening, everyone. I'm absolutely delighted to welcome you to this very exciting and distinguished panel discussion on election 2011. What did we learn? Organized by Concordia University's workshop on social science research. My name is Csaba Nikolényi. I'm Associate Professor of Political Science here at this department at Concordia, and I'm also outgoing English co-editor of the Canadian Journal of Political Science. We are going to follow the order that was published in the official program. Let me just repeat it. And then I would like to say a few introductory words about our distinguished panelists. The first presentation will be by Professor Harold Clarke and Thomas Scotto, titled Political Choice in Canada, 2011, followed by Professor Peter Loewen from the University of Toronto, who will be speaking to us about what we have learned from the Vote Compass project. The third presentation will be delivered by Professor Patrick Fournier, who is joining us from the University of Montreal. And the title of his presentation, the 2011 Canadian Election Study. Now, first presenters, Professor Clarke and Scotto, don't need much introduction. Professor Clarke has published extensively on electoral politics in general, but also electoral politics in the United States, Britain, Canada. He is current editor of the journal Electoral Studies. His work is very, very well known, and he's joining us from the University of Texas, where he's currently Ashbel Smith Professor in the School of Economic, Political, and Social Policy Sciences. His presentation will be co-delivered with Professor Thomas Scotto, who is joining us from the University of Essex, where he is holding the position of lecturer in government. Professor Scotto is co-editor and co-author of a recent publication titled Making Political Choices, Canada and the United States. As I mentioned, Professor Loewen, the second presenter, is joining us from the University of Toronto, and he's also Director of Analytics in the Vote Compass project. Professor Loewen has published extensively, even though he's a young scholar, in various leading journals, such as the Canadian Journal of Political Science and others. The third presentation will be delivered by Professor Patrick Fournier from the University of Montreal, who, amongst his many accomplishments, he currently also has the position of being the principal investigator of the Canadian National Election Study. And Professor Fournier is co-author of a recent publication by Oxford University Press, which is looking at the politics of citizens' assembly and assemblies and electoral reform. I have spoken more than I should have. Without further ado, let me turn the floor over to our first presenters, Professor Clarke and Scotto.
Thank you. See if I can get over here without tripping too many times here. My name is Harold Clarke, and together with my colleagues Jason Reifler, Tom Scotto, and Al Kornberg, we have been doing a series of studies in various combinations of us now for quite a long time. Tom has been on board, I believe, since 2004 with the Political Support in Canada project. And we actually, I was thinking today, I have done an election study for every Canadian election since 1974. So it's time that I should have learned something after all these years. I started at the University of Windsor as a professor. I was 25 years old when I started, and working with Larry Leduc and John Pamet and Jane Jensen, we got the 1974 Canadian election study. And in various ways, we have been studying, elections ever since in this country. And in 2011, we were fortunate to have a grant from the American National Science Foundation, which enabled us to do the research that I'll be talking about, albeit briefly today. We've had the data for, about a week, Tom? And so we are just starting to explore it. But of course, we're not coming at this study sort of out of the blue, if you will, but rather we have been doing this for, with considerable amount of sort of priors, if you will, if you're a Bayesian, about what's going on. And I'll talk briefly about this, and I think it would be a very nice contrast with, hopefully, with some of the other work. This is actually, to start with, it'll actually end up a question. I was talking before got going here today about whatever possessed this man to be instrumental in having an election, a federal election occur. And that, I still think, is a very good question. It actually has more force now that I've seen the data on support for the Liberals and Mr. Ignatieff himself. One of the things that we know, of course, is right out of the box, one of the prima facie justification for this election coming from the opposition, particularly from the Liberals and Mr. Ignatieff himself, had to do with this idea of showing contempt for Parliament and Canadian democracy more generally. And it turns out actually that there was some, it looks like there's some traction for this. This wasn't like to answer my own question. In part, I don't think you can win an election with this kind of stuff. Maybe you can get support in the Harvard Commons room, but I don't think it's going to run that well in Canada. But certainly on its face, we're seeing that there's sizable numbers of people who really agreed with the idea that the Conservatives and Prime Minister Harper had shown contempt to Parliament, had run roughshod over Canadian democracy and so forth. These are not ideas which on their face the public opinion data are dismissing, and that's something to keep in mind as we move along to the modeling later on. Of course, another argument that was made up front in the early days maneuvering in this campaign was the specter, quote unquote, of a coalition government that was being raised by the Conservatives, just as they have pretty regularly over the last several years. And of course, Mr. Ignatieff in particular denying that this was this the furthest thing from his mind. And of course, I'm not privy to that, but we do have some data about how Canadians reacted in the political support in Canada, the project. This is not a huge project like the Compass project is absolutely enormous. I mean, it dwarfs everything I've ever seen in terms of size. We're running with a representative national sample of about 2,500 pre-election interviews and 18 to 1,900 post. We're still gathering a few stragglers, so it may get up to 19. But you can see here that clearly there's a large number of people who think that a single-party government is better, a majority is better. So if the Conservatives coming back and emphasizing, the idea of having a majority government and so forth, whatever you might think yourself about this, there are a lot of Canadians out there who said, yes, this is probably a pretty good idea to have a traditional majority government, single-party government in Canada. Campaign dynamics, of course, were absolutely fascinating. One of the things I love about Canadian politics is that we really do have dynamics. This is what makes the study of electoral choice so much fun, is that things really do move around, and they move around, as we all know. This is actually, we have 174 polls here. This is a very simple sort of smoother here, what we call a Hodrick-Prescott filter. Later on, we'll do some fancier sort of Bayesian stuff, state space modeling of this, but I'm sure it's going to show the same kind of pattern. We all know this, and so that'll be just sort of to show we can do it. The campaign trends, if you just take a look at what's going on, a simple linear trend model, you can see just what we know again. The Liberals and the Bloc heading south very profoundly, and the NDP, of course, trending upward, particularly as we saw after the first debate. This is not news for anyone in this room, except for the size of the loss by the Liberals, the size of the gain by the NDP. These are really big numbers, particularly in the Liberal case. I think I'm right in saying this is the first election. Is this the first election in Canadian history where the Liberals were not either the government or the official opposition? So this actually, these are big numbers, okay? And seats, I think I'm right on that. There was one went back. It was originally 167, now 166, I believe. But clearly, this is a story we know. How do we explain electoral choice? Well, our perspective, like after all these years, we should come clean. Surely the granting agencies have a right to say, well, what have you guys learned? What do you know? Do you know anything, or you just want more money from us? And I said, well, both. And And so we've been exponents of something which actually started developing with Larry and John and Jane back in the 70s in the Canadian context, which we now call a valence politics model of electoral choice. We think this is the core. It's not the whole explanation. It's the core set of variables that help us to explain political choice not only in Canada, but in Britain, the United States, and we've been doing recent work in Germany as well. The issues that matter for most people most of the time are what we call valence issues. People care about things like the economy. They care about health care. They care about crime. They care about immigration. They care about issues that have one-sided distributions, typically. Everybody's in favor of, virtually everybody. I mean, there are a few guys, bond traders. I mean, there may be some guys who are betting against themselves, like in Goldman Sachs and so on. But basically, most people want to have a healthy economy characterized by, vigorous, sustainable growth, low unemployment, low inflation. They want a healthcare system that works. They want freedom from threats to personal and national security. These are the things that really, you touch these issues, these are not going well, and you're the government, you're typically in trouble, and often in big trouble. These are the issues that matter, and flowing from this is the idea that it's not the what, it's not really the position, but rather it's the who and the how that really animate political decision-making on issues. The second thing is that people, informed by a lot of recent work in political psychology and experimental economics, people make decisions largely in terms of what we call fast and frugal heuristics. The guys who tried to figure out the equilibrium, the saber-toothed tiger took them out of the gene pool a long time ago, okay? People don't make their decisions that way for the most part. What they do is they pay attention to cues provided by party leaders. Who can do the job? I mean, nobody knows. How are you going to fix the economy? Who knows? But they have intuitions about who might be able to fix it. And this is very important. And it helps to explain the importance, not only in Canada, but elsewhere, of party leader images as proximate determinants of electoral choice. The cueing effect of leaders is really, really important. Partisanship. We've done a lot of work on partisanship. Partisanship also is a huge cue. Unlike the Michigan, unlike our friends in Ann Arbor and our friends in New Haven, we believe we have conclusively demonstrated that partisanship has a dynamic, not a quotidian dynamic, but an ongoing sort of dynamic that is very important for understanding the larger dynamics of political choice, not only in Canada but elsewhere as well. And so that's an important cue as well. We've known this for a long time, but it's true. We've done a lot of survey experiments and so forth, a lot of panel work. If you want to see where we're coming from in more detail, here's a couple of recent publications that we have done, one on the Canadian and American cases, and then a most recent one in Britain. Federal party ID, just a few things. Very good, thank you. A few things. Party ID. Take a look at how the Liberals went down. 10 points. 10 points in our study since 2008. I mean, that's a huge drop, aggregate drop. That's a big deal. It's not so much that the Conservatives are doing very well. They're only at 30%. I mean, you couldn't win an election back in the 70s and 80s on 30%. That's what the losers got, in a bad defeat. Go back and look at the Liberals in 1984, for example. Valence issues. Big change in terms of how people see the economy this time as opposed to 2008. Best leader on the economy, and here's where Mr. Harper gets a lot of traction. He really invites people to talk to him about the economy. Even in 2008, this helped him. He has an edge, for better or for worse. However you see it, he's got a huge edge. And look where Ignatieff is. Look where Ignatieff is. Part of the, I would argue, this, one of the big stories is how poorly Canadians perceived. Whether they should or should not have is another story. But this is a big story of this election, is how negative they were disposed they were to Michael Ignatieff. Federal government doing a good job with health care. We asked a battery of questions. Of course, the Liberals started out. Another thing they wanted to talk about were was health care. And they were right. Lots of people would like to spend more health care, and they'd like to spend more on health care than the military or jails. But if you ask them the other question, how's the government doing on health care? They're doing pretty well by a margin of 2 to 1. Top-ranked issues, clearly, economy and healthcare. Party best on a top-ranked issue? Look where the Conservatives are. Totally dominating, eh? Just totally dominating. Party leader images, and here, this is really telling. Look where Dion and Ignatieff. Dion didn't do very well, eh? 4.2, that's mediocre, that's very mediocre. But look where our friend Ignatieff is now, 3 years later, 3.0. Look where Jack Layton is. Who's got the highest, since we've been doing this since like we're actually looking back to the 60s even, the highest leader score ever was 6.8 for Trudeau in 1968. You know, Jack Layton, whatever you think of Smiling Jack, look where he is, 6.2. I mean, this guy's been around forever, and but nevertheless, he took off in this campaign, and debates did really well. Look at Ignatieff, 5%, 5%. Composite model of voting, we're just starting in on this. We do all sorts of fancy estimation later on, but the stuff that really is interesting is the strength of the valence politics model works extremely well. We've got some other things in here. I draw attention to these guys right here because we're going to get this in the vote compass stuff in just a minute. These are sort of position issue factors. Those things don't play directly. But if you move back and look at what are the determinants of leader images, they're big there. They're really big there. So don't make any mistake. These other issues, ranging from abortion, gun registry, et cetera, have a role to play. We've got a new variable there we're going to talk about later on, the Canadian Dream variable. But right now, 2 winners, obviously, 2 losers. Conservatives dominated on one of the fundamentals, the NDP on another. The Liberals are decimated on all 3. And if you want to get to sleep at night, whether you're Rick Mercer or otherwise, get Stephen Harper to read you the budget. And there you are. Lots of more questions than answers right now. Obviously, the campaign dynamic is like incredibly interesting, and I think that we're going to have a lot of data on this from the CES and Compass and so on. And we have some as well. To my mind, this is really, because there obviously was change, big change during this election. And you say, why? Why do these 2 parties, which are so strong historically in their own ways, do so badly? And so we'll learn more as we go along. But thank you very much. And
I'll go over where Harold was.
Thanks very much. Just for your information, we are going to take questions from the floor after all the presentations are over. So next, Professor Loewen.
Sure. Just wait for that. Know how to get to this. It's just on that computer at the back. So I don't have pictures that are as nice as Harold's, certainly. And then just hit Control F maybe and full screen it. Fine. Go to View or Window and go to View, yeah. And then full screen mode. Perfect. Okay, thanks. So I'm Peter Loewen from the University of Toronto. Here's our title, What Can We Learn from Vote Compass? Or, but your sample is self-selected. If you want me to answer the question right away, that you can learn from Vote Compass if you read the Toronto Sun, is that we were crap at winning the election for Michael Ignatieff, but we'll move right along. Of course, that was our objective. I'm going to tell you about the tool. For those of you who aren't familiar with Vote Compass, so I suppose most of you are, tell you about its uptake. It's quite a remarkable story, actually, of democratic engagement and interest in Canada, far outpacing anything else I'm aware of, but also just outpacing people's expectations, I think, about Canadians' interests and issues. I want to talk a bit about campaign dynamics and what we can learn from Vote Compass about the dynamics of the campaign. Most of that is to the end of trying to convince you that these data, which are from people who are selecting into a study rather than being selected randomly, can still tell us about a campaign, okay? And then, I think we would stand over here, okay. And then what I'm going to do is show you the same thing with some vote forecasts, to show you that the self-selected data can still give us some handle or empirical purchase over what went on in the campaign. And then finally, I'm going to talk about the importance of issues for vote choice. I'll draw out some small distinctions in sort of orientation about the causes of electoral success between myself, maybe Professor Clarke and Professor Fournier and Professor Scotto, but for the most part it's to show you kind of how issues matter at a local level. So I'm going to presume most of you know about Vote Compass or did it. The short story is that it's an online electoral literacy tool. Some people also call these voting advice applications. I don't much like that term. They're very common in Europe. There's competing organizations with their own sort of compasses or tools or vote match things you can go on in each country. They're less common in Canada as it happens. What they do is they allow participants to go onto a website to answer a battery of questions where they identify their own views and then see how those views match against the views of the respective major parties on those same issues. Participants are then plotted on a stylized two-dimensional graph, and they can see with some proximity measure which party is closest to theirs. Okay, there's some questions about how it's measured. It's an average over 2 dimensions. Lots of ways to skin a cat. We'll skin it differently next time. What happens, though, is that we'll skin it many ways, in fact. But afterwards, the thing that's really interesting to us is that participants can then see where they are in each position and see where we've plotted the parties and see how we've plotted the parties there, okay, and why they're in those things. And then they can also recalibrate their position by changing the importance or the salience of certain issues. What we've got here is a bunch of people going on a website and clicking over and over and over again and telling us what they are interested in and what their views are. And that tells us a lot about elections. Here's the usage. The tool was in partnership, I'll just say, with Vote Compass and the CBC, overseen by an advisory board that included Elizabeth Cadango Center, which was a very generous sponsor. We had 1.9 million completions of the tool. That's, some people are completing it multiple times to be certain. I did it about 150,000 myself. 700,000 respondents indicated their vote intention to us. Upwards of nearly 200,000 completed a longer political survey, and 90,000 have agreed to participate in future studies. So we have, in essence, we call it bulk continuous data, but we have a massive amount of data about individuals in Canada. So, for those 181,000 people, for the 700,000, we know their positions on 30 issues, and we know which parties they prefer. We know their leader ratings. We know through geotags where they live and what constituency they are. So we have a massive amount of information. But can we learn from these data? This is really the question, right? Here are our problems. We have multiple responses, right? People could be responding multiple times, right? We don't want the same person in a study, right? People only vote once. We only want them in a study once, but we can't control that, largely. Second, respondents may not take care in answering questions, right? And this may introduce measurement bias because they're just clicking through. Third, our subjects are going to differ from the general population in unobserved ways. That is, people who go on to Vote Compass are going to be different than the average randomly drawn Canadian. These last 2 points apply with near equal felicity to a study that's done by telephone or a study that's done online, okay? We can't be certain that subjects are answering honestly. We know they're inducing measurement error, and we know that they differ in unobserved ways from the population. We don't know what those ways are. The bias might be greater with Vote Compass, but the point is that these problems exist for every type of quote-unquote representative survey, okay? It's not to run down other surveys, it's only to say that we know then that there are methods to correct this because it can be corrected in other survey methods, okay? So as to the question, can we learn from these data? The answer is yes. The test, in our view, is whether or not these data are useful at predicting the outcome of the election, or even post-dicting it, and whether they're useful at helping us explain the outcome of the election. So this is kind of the face validity test we're going to put it to. I want to start with some dynamics here, okay? At the bottom of this graph is the day of the campaign, okay? And each of these lines represents the growth, or in some cases, the incredible decrease in support for campaigns. And what we've done is, we're not going to tell you what share of respondents told us they were New Democrats, but we're going to fix everything to 1, okay? And on this graph, we're going to show whether or not the ratio of your support at the end of the campaign in comparison to your support at the beginning of the campaign has gone up or down. So you see the NDP's gone up remarkably in Quebec, right? The Conservatives have gone down somewhat, and the Bloc and the Liberals show quite serious decline, okay? And this is just sort of, it's just a fraction of their support on some day over their support on the first day. Here's what the CES looks like. Patrick may put up the same graph. That's the CES in Quebec. Look at those 2 graphs side by side. How much difference is there, right, once we correct for the fact that we don't know the levels at which people are selecting into this? It looks pretty similar, right? I'll give you another test of this. I'm just going to push through here about 30 graphs very quickly, okay? And what these are maps of the campaign from the start to the end, okay? Each map has every constituency in Canada in it, okay? The map is going to become more colorful if a party's support is growing within our sample within that constituency. It's going to become darker if their support is decreasing based on what they're at their first day in that constituency. But tell me if what you see corresponds to what you think occurred in the campaign. We'll just stop right here. The New Democrats are in the bottom right, Liberals are on the left. The Bloc is obviously constrained to Quebec, and the Conservatives in the top right-hand corner. The debate's going to happen right here. Happy Jack's going to take off. Michael Ignatieff is still experiencing some shreds of hope. It springs eternal in the chests of men. And we'll come up to, I think, let's stop on April 30th. Okay? There's the story of the campaign by the end. Remarkable NDP growth across the whole country. Actually, not a lot of conservative growth. Stability, more or less, right? A lot of those grays are actually very light blues. They're hard to see at this point, but it's small growth. But small growth in a lot of places. And then marked, secular, consistent decline for the Liberal Party of Canada and the Bloc Québécois. Okay? And this is just raw out of our data. Can we predict election outcomes out of these data? If you're a good pollster, if you're a great pollster, you can predict election outcome. Can we do it with our data? Well, here's what we do. The positives of the vote compass are that we have massive amounts of localized data. So in some constituencies, we have thousands of people telling us how they're going to vote. It's a biased sample, but we still have thousands of people telling us how they're going to vote. So if you have two constituencies with the same bias, but one of them has remarkably more people telling you they're going to vote NDP than the other one, which one do you think is going to go to the NDP? The one with the higher share of people telling you they're going to vote for that party, even after you acknowledge that there's bias there, right? The negatives are that we have these potentially huge problems of self-selection. But what if we can correct for this bias, right? So this is what we do, or this is what we did. Intuitively, let's assume that this bias is constant across a region. So whatever it is about vote compass that causes people who are inclined to vote for the Liberal Party or the New Democratic Party to go to vote compass more than people who are going to vote for the Conservatives, it may have something to do with it being on CBC's website. Whatever that is, let's assume that it's constant across some region, okay? Well, let's assume then that we can take regional results from a poll of polls and we can know the real distribution of support for each party in that constituency. Then we can use that to correct whatever bias we have within vote compass. So I won't go through this too much, but this is the procedure we went through, top to bottom, in the last 2 days of the campaign to create a forecast of what the election result would be. In essence, we just took that poll of polls and created a weight to correct our data. We corrected it, and then we did a forecast over who would win which seats and how many they would win, okay? We conducted a forecast 1 day prior to the election. I don't want you to think that there's some complicated rumor this was going on. I was in my apartment yelling over Skype with the 2 grad students who work on this project. These were our forecasted numbers, okay? Our absolute error was 16, 27, 30, all right? What happens when you get numbers like that? You get really scared and you're chicken because there's no way that could have been true. So we corrected our numbers. I won't let you read this too much of this email because you'll see all the people I sent it to, but this is the email that we sent out night of the election with our corrected forecast because we were certain the one we had made with that simple method couldn't be right. And this was, and I'll happily send you the memo, but this is our corrected forecast, okay? This is the one we decided must have been right before the election and sent out, okay? We just did more corrections at a regional level. We did some regressions to get some residuals to correct for local effects, blah, blah, blah. Bad idea. Our total, but our total absolute error was just 76. We got 76 seats wrong in essence, okay? Barry Kay had the best forecast, okay, at LizPop. His error was 57, sure. Eric Grenier at 308.com, his error was 98, his absolute error. So there's a lesson in here somewhere. We did pretty well, right? I mean, I think we should be able to do very well because we have so many people, but we did pretty well. Okay, the last thing I want to talk about, and I'll push through this with some expediency, is I want to talk about one of the great advantages of Vote Compass for us understanding elections, and it's that we can understand the effects of issues at a local level. We can understand how they matter, okay? If you talk to an MP who's lost in the last election, I assure you they'll tell you that the reason why they lost was some mix of national dynamics and some ill positioning on some issue that mattered to their constituents, okay? The prevailing wisdom, of course, is that issues don't matter all that much in the first case, and issues certainly don't matter locally, okay? There's not a large personal vote, which is related to that. There is growing, I think, empirical evidence that this is not the case, okay? That in fact, local issues matter quite a bit. And I want to show you one way in which they do, okay? But let me just ask you this question. If the effects of issues were truly local, how would you know if you only had 50 respondents in one single constituency? If there's one constituency in Canada where the gun registry was going to decide the outcome of the election, that issue matters, right, to that one constituency. But you would never find it in an election study where you had just 30 respondents. It's just the name of the game, unfortunately, right? If you want to do a proper representative sample with 4,000 people, you're limited in how many people you can have. So I'll go by this one. But what I want to do here is I want to just lay out that what normally occurs is election studies assume an essentially homogeneous model across a country or within a region. They'll say the things that drive the vote are the same in each constituency neighboring each other, right? It's a very defensible approach. There's no doubt about it. They may vary effects by region or province, right? But they're going to run one regression. And it's a function of not having enough data, okay? But we have more than 200,000 respondents. So we have enough people in Vote Compass to run individual vote choice models in every constituency in Canada and have more people in those models than the average poll has for the whole country. Okay, we have bias for sure, but we've got power. That's the trade-off in some sense. So this is what we do. We estimate a vote choice model for each party in each constituency in Canada. Okay, so in Colchester and Musquodoboit Harbour, I surely could have chosen an easier one to say, but take that constituency, we're going to estimate Conservative vote choice on all 30 issue positions of respondents in that constituency. Okay, and then we're going to repeat it for the Liberals and repeat it for the New Democrats. And then we're going to see which of those issues matter. Okay, now for those of you who've done your method stuff, you'll know pretty quickly that if I'm running 308 times 3 regressions with 30 variables, I've got something like 2,700 variables. I'm going to have a lot of false positives. A lot of things are going to appear to matter that don't matter in reality, right? Okay. So what we do is something called a Bonferroni Correction, and essentially we only accept as having a significant effect a variable which has a p-value of 0.0001, okay? Which essentially is going to be right by chance one time in 10,000. Okay. So we're going to run these regressions for every constituency and see what pops as being significant. The prevailing wisdom would probably be that things should matter constantly across the country or they shouldn't matter at all. Okay, here's 30 issues. Okay, for the Conservative Party, the constituencies are all arrayed along the bottom. Okay, and all I want to point out is that every time you see a red dot, that tells you that some issue mattered for vote choice in that constituency in a significant way after controlling for this massive power we have. Okay, it's a very conservative estimate. What matters for Conservative vote choice? Views on Afghanistan, military spending, economic relations with the US, the long gun registry. Well, that doesn't matter, right? Well, corporate taxes, Quebec independence a little bit. It matters out west for some voter somewhere, right? Or some constituency somewhere. Same-sex marriage still matters, right? It's been put to bed 2 years ago, apparently. The oil sands. Look at the Liberal Party. What matters for them? Well, the gun registry, not in a good way, by the way. Quebec independence. What doesn't matter for them? Daycare, employment insurance, health care, right? They can't get anything to work for them. Corporate tax. This is the hill Michael Ignatieff was going to die on. That has a significant effect in something like 15 constituencies. Now the NDP. They do pretty well in Afghanistan, actually. They've got a distinctly different position than the Conservative Party. They do well among people who are concerned about Quebec independence, right, in Quebec. The graphs go from east to west as it happens. And they do well on private sector health care, pretty well on employment insurance. Okay? Let me wrap up on these things. I think I'll repeat my sales pitch here, that we can learn a lot from bulk continuous data, though it's pretty thorny, okay? And I don't think we can actually learn anything from it, or I don't know how I wouldn't learn anything from it absent actual election studies to anchor the results, so it's always worth saying that. But Vote Compass can teach us a lot about the importance of local issues, right? And how these matter for campaigns. In terms of the campaign itself, this campaign's really, it's a good title for a book, Change in Stability, or Change in Continuity. The campaign was really a market story of this, right? The Conservatives just keep it at 37% and climb it up to 40%. And that's all they need to win, right? And it's a story of remarkable growth for the NDP and remarkable decline for what was the third most successful party in the history of democracy, okay? And then for the Bloc as well. You can argue from this, though it's sort of back of the napkin, that the Conservatives and the NDP certainly won on their issues. And Harold would say the same thing. The Liberals failed to do so. And then we just raise the question about whether campaigns are actually all that national after all. But I'll leave it at that for now. Thanks.
Thanks very much, Professor. And our third presenter is Professor Patrick Fournier from the University of Montreal.
I'm less free to roam because I'm wired in. I'm not wireless. So I'll stay close to the screen here. I want to talk about two things today. First, briefly outline the 2011 Canadian election study, and then I try to answer the key mystery of this election. Why did the NDP make a breakthrough here in Quebec? So First, a quick outline. The core of the new CS team are these 4 individuals, 2 of which are currently sitting in the audience. But it wasn't simply the 4 of us sitting in a room by ourselves and deciding on every issue. We actually also accepted the advice, feedback, suggestions of 8 collaborators who were really useful. 2 of them are sitting in the room again today. And also, we asked for suggestions, proposals from the wider community, and many of them were integrated into the study as well. This is the current format of data collection. Only the campaign wave is currently completed, and actually I'll only be able to draw on that campaign rolling cross-section for this presentation. The other 3 waves are currently in the field. But ultimately, in the end, we will have 430 items asked of respondents, of actually those who survive up until the web wave. From the 4,300 we start with, actually 850 of these are respondents who are part of a panel that have actually taken part in 3 or 4 election studies since 2004, and that can be a great tool to study inter-election dynamics. So I'll simply be drawing on the rolling cross-section. So at this point, with only, actually at an early stage, so close to the election, with only a quarter of the data set available, the analysis I'll be presenting will necessarily be quite preliminary. But still, I think they are useful. Why the NDP in Quebec? That's the key mystery, right? You've all heard about how this election is historic. You've all heard that it was the worst Liberal defeat in history. It's the first time the Liberals are not first or second. It's the very first time the NDP is better than third nationally since in their existence. The complete collapse of the Bloc Québécois, and on and on and on. Well, most of these patterns are actually due to Quebec, right? It's in large part, it's due to the totally unexpected, totally surprising, what's been called the orange, la vague orange, the orange surge in Quebec. And I'll try to answer that key question of why it happened. Why did the NDP make a breakthrough in Quebec? As I said, with a quarter of the data set, this will be preliminary and mostly showing wiggly lines and pointing at wiggly lines and trying to tell a story, but ultimately more serious analyses, multivariate models and so on will follow. So we did capture in the CES the orange surge in Quebec. So these are vote intentions, only Quebec, across the campaign. And it's important to note, and this was also present on the vote compass slide, that the NDP surge in Quebec was really a 3-step jump. There was first early gains early in the campaign, which led the NDP from the 15% dismal support range up into second place in the 25% range in front of both the Liberals and the Conservatives. Then it flattened out for a while. It took off again, and putting, for the first time in history, the NDP in first place in Quebec. And there was, again, another jump in the very last few days. Really, in the last 5 days, NDP support increased again as well. So really, 3 steps to explain, and I'll be trying to return to point back to these 3 steps, trying to figure out what happened throughout the presentation. So, a mystery to explain, various potential suspects. These are all hypotheses you've seen circulate in editorials among journalists, amongst political scientists discussing over beer. Was it induced by? Was it due to fluke polls? Was it due to real campaign events? Was it simply latent mania? Was it a vote for federalism? Was it a vote for the left or something else? I will actually try to storm through all of these hypotheses in the next 10 minutes with our, again, early data and try to evaluate all of these. So the first one, fluke polls. This explanation was actually proposed by Gilles Duceppe. In the aftermath of the Bloc defeat, he said there was a weird outlier poll which seemed to have pushed people towards the NDP. It's not clear which poll he was referring to, but the 2 likely candidates are these 2 gray lines here. This one is the very first poll that showed the NDP was second in Quebec. That was the Angus Reid poll released on April 7th. This is the very first poll that showed the NDP in the lead in Quebec. That's the crop poll released on April 21st. When I look at this chart, I do not see two rogue polls that are suddenly influencing public opinion. In both cases, support for the NDP in the Canadian election study was already at the level of these polls before they were released. And after their publication, there was no boost in NDP support that was generated in either case. So to me, these are normal polls showing actual support that we were also measuring in the field. So apparently no fluke polls that are actually artificially stimulating turnout support for the NDP. So hypothesis 1, down. The second one, campaign events. Can these three steps be explained by campaign dynamics in Quebec, by actual key events? The three best suspects here are the appearance of Jack Layton on Quebec's main talk show, Tout le monde en parle, on April 3rd, the French leaders' debate that occurred on April 13, and the two speeches pronounced by first Jacques Parizeau and then Gérald Larose, occurring a few days before the end of the campaign. So I'll try to find out if they are responsible actually for campaign dynamics. It's clear that for the very first event, the appearance of Jack Layton on talk show, it seems to coincide with the very first step, the very first jump in NDP support. And actually, since this is a 7-day centered moving average, the climb seems to be bang on. The coincidence, the timing seems to be exactly right. But again, this isn't conclusive. This isn't simply pointing at legal lines and finding that something starts at the right time. But I'll return to this in a second. So it's not entirely clear. And it's not entirely clear for the second event as well, the leaders' debate, because support for the NDP did increase, but it did not increase right away. It wasn't an instantaneous effect like you normally see when a debate occurs, right? Normally, a party just takes off. And here, it took off many days later. But still, there might be something going on there, because if you separate support for the NDP over time into debate watchers in blue and non-debate watchers in red, there's a distinct difference. It's clear that debate watchers were drawn into the NDP in greater numbers and earlier than debate watchers. These people catch on a bit later, and that's what you typically find in a debate effect. But still, again, it's not decisive because there's a gap, there's a delay, which is a bit weird. And it also could be the case that, for instance, debate watchers are simply more politically active, more politically attentive, and they're actually reacting to something else in this period. But there might be some support, again, for the debate story, although we can't. Maybe we're cautious, but we can't be entirely conclusive at this point, at this juncture. Final event, the two speeches that were supposed to rally sovereignists, the two speeches where the Bloc said, okay, we'll try to fall back on our strong base. These two speeches seem to actually have backfired. Actually, the Bloc lost support. One speech actually occurred on the 25th. The second one was on the 27th. That was the more controversial one. The Bloc actually lost support, and the NDP picked up support at this point. So again, it's another circumstantial evidence that the event might have been responsible, in this case, for the third jump. So the three steps seem to be coinciding with events, although we can't, again, be entirely certain. The third possible candidate is leadership. Was this simply Jack Layton being all of a sudden causing a wave of Layton mania in Quebec? It's clear that Jack Layton was rated positively. So here what you have is not vote intentions, it's leader thermometer means. So we simply ask people to rate on a 0 to 100 scale how people feel about the leaders. The average leader rating for Jack Layton is 60%. But the thing is, in Quebec, Layton had 60% in 2008 as well. So you had the same level of support for Layton in both years, but you had dismal performance last time and an incredible breakthrough this time. So there must be something more than the absolute level, right? There must be either some dynamics taking place or something else, and we can tease a bit of this out. For instance, his appearance on the talk show could have generated some popularity for him personally, and it seems to actually have been the case. Again, it coincides with the first jump in what we saw in vote shares. There's actually another increase right here in evaluations of Jack Layton. But surprisingly, there's an equally impressive jump in party evaluation. So this is the party thermometer. So at the same time, something was going on. So is it leadership? Is it simply good party positioning? Like the NDP was suddenly proposing, for example, applying Bill 101 regulations to workplaces that were governed by the federal government. So this could have been at play. So it's not entirely clear that it's a leadership issue that's going on here. The other event that could have generated, of course, leader impact is the debate between leaders, and which is a bit before the second step, but could be responsible for the second jump in NDP support. And Layton did improve a bit here, but not much. Certainly, the gain he made here is nowhere as near as big as the gain that occurred for vote intentions during this period. But actually, the overall level might not be the key here. It might be the relative evaluation of leaders, because if Layton didn't improve much in this period, or didn't improve much since over 2008, Gilles Duceppe certainly took a hit. He was at 60% in 2008, at the same level as Jack Layton. He ended up at 45. And actually, when you look at the second step of the movement in NDP support, it's between the 17th right there and the 22nd. In this period, where you had the second jump in NDP support, coincides precisely with the decline of Duceppe support, and so the widening of the gap between the two leaders. So Layton is not all of a sudden a much more attractive leader overall, but he is, in relative terms, the most preferred leader, or the most obviously preferred leader than he was previously, because in 2008, Duceppe and Layton were basically tied, and as this gap was widening, so did the second jump in NDP support, again, a bit after the debate. And interestingly, for this argument, there is no increase in the party thermometer. So NDP was not evaluated more positively as a party. It seemed to have been really a leadership effect. Federalist vote. The idea here is, did people abandon sovereignty? Did people just embrace federalism? Did that occur in Quebec? This aggregate trend doesn't support that. You have simply support for sovereignty remaining around the 40% level, even though the NDP is making massive inroads in Quebec. Overall, sovereignty support remains basically the same, and they actually end up almost tied at the end. But this is indirect. We can look more precisely at the flow of the vote. So to try to figure out, where did NDP voters come from? So here, what you have here is how people report voting in 2008 in Quebec, only after the debates. So we're concentrating on the key outline of support, compared to 2008 vote intentions. So only 25% of NDP voters in 2011 actually voted for that party 3 years before. 30% of the NDP voters approximately came from the ranks of the bloc. 20% of NDP voters came from the Liberals, and close to 20% came from the Conservatives. So they're making gains across the board. So it's really like a rainbow coalition in a way. And if you specifically look at support for sovereignty, which we have, so we're crossing support for sovereignty with each group of voter, actually a third of NDP supporters would like Quebec to separate. So people were dumping the bloc, but they were remaining sovereignist even if they were voting orange. So another hypothesis turned down. Could this surge be the result of a new value dimension emerging in Quebec, a switch to ideology, a left-right vote as opposed to a nationalism versus federalism vote? I can provide some preliminary evidence. This is simply the level of support for a bunch of issue positions that are related to ideology. So spending on a bunch of items. These are the only questions we have that are close to ideology in the campaign wave, but we'll get more as we go along. How does the level of support for each of these differ across the four party support groups? And the NDP is not at the extreme left. It is often almost exactly like the bloc voters. it is very often very similar to Liberal voters, and they often share the views of Conservative voters as well. So to me, the overall impression here is this is not a picture of ideological polarization. So it doesn't seem to be simply a new dimension that's cutting across Quebec, right versus left. It's actually quite homogeneous. So to wrap up, fluke polls, no. Real events, maybe. Leadership, maybe, but not Leiden mania. Federalist vote, no. Swing to the left, no. I think I have something else. Yes. Other proposals have been made, right? Some people say it's a thirst for change, a rejection of parties in place. Some people say it's actually voting for a party that actually the NDP could win. They'll block the Conservatives, so we should vote for them. Some people say, actually Pierre Martin argued this, it's mostly because the Bloc was so successful in showing that you don't have to vote for government at the federal level, you can actually try crazy experiments like voting orange, and it doesn't really matter because it's mostly irrelevant. That's another explanation, temporary infatuation. I can't tackle all of these right now because I only have partial data, but we will once we get all the data in. And I assure you, I'll do more than point at wiggly lines, and we'll have serious evidence to back it up. But currently, the mystery, it's been cleared up a bit. Some of these suspects have been identified or ruled out. Maybe a last slide to conclude. This is the evolution of party identification over the campaign. One reassuring thing, party ID for the NDP doesn't move very much. There's a bit of uptick at the end, but it goes from, 8 to 12. This is reassuring. It means that party ID is actually different from vote choice. It's not simply reflecting, even though there were massive gains, right? Massive inroads from the NDP up to 43%, I believe. Party ID remains stable, but this is also mean that the NDP has its work cut out for 2015 because the Bloc is not dead. In the partisans are a very valuable commodity in elections, and they currently outshine the NDP in a clear way. And so the NDP has some work to do, and the Bloc may not be entirely deceased. Thank you.
I would like to thank each of our presenters for keeping so diligently and attentively to the strictly imposed 15-minute time limit. Before I would open up the floor for questions, I would like to invite the NDP Member of Parliament, the Honourable Hong Mei, to provide a short commentary on what we have just heard.
Thank you. To be honest, it's great to hear from this side what happens, because I was in the campaign, so it was kind of different. Actually, I was in Ottawa today. I just drove back from Ottawa to Montreal. So today I was in Parliament at the House. So it's fun to just see how things were looked at. And from my side, how I saw it was more, I think, a thirst for change. We were offering something different. I ran in 2008. Actually, is the mic working? No. It is? Is it working? Yeah. So in 2008, I actually ran, and it was very different from 2011. We had a campaign where we actually showed that we could offer things differently. Our ads were different. And I think we got a good response from the ads, from the campaign, from what Jacqueline was saying, and the message that we were giving out. So I think, well, again, I'm not a political professor, and I can't really say what really made it happen. But for me, I think it's change, and also with we did have a great leader, and being involved with the NDP with the Quebec section, I knew that in terms of campaign, we had something really strong going on, and we do have some really good MPs, so that also helps. So that's my view. Thank you.
Thank you very much.